nevertheless, a pienso had to be cleaned.
Yeah. Now, there's a word we don't use anymore. It's pienso.
Oh, don't we?
Oh,
okay.
no. You don't say pienso.
Oh, so, okay. Well,
we're
talking...
You say 화장실, but back in those days, it was a pienso. 안녕하세요. This is Mark Peterson with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center, and today I have with me one of my oldest friends. This is Bruce Snow. Tell the folks 안녕하세요.
안녕하세요.
Bruce and I were in Korea in 1965, and we thought today we'd talk about what things were like back in 1965. What are some of your first memories of Korea? You arrived what time of year?
I arrived in October of 1965.
I arrived in November, so we're just 1 month apart. Yeah. What was it like?
When I arrived in Korea, there weren't as many bridges over the Han River as there are now.
Had the Cheong'un-dong Hangang-gyo been built yet? I remember the opening ceremony of the Cheong'un-dong Hangang-gyo. Do you remember that?
No, I did not remember that.
We only had the one bridge, but they had opened the Cheong'un-dong Hangang-gyo, which is now the what's the name of it now anyway? The one from Sinchon area that crosses the, and then they built the Cheongsam Hangang-gyo. Then they quit numbering them.
Yeah.
And now they're like 27 or something.
Probably.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. So Korea was absolutely. I had never been to Korea before. It was fascinating to me.
Yeah.
The first thing that I did notice, however, was that coming from the United States, the economy was not very good.
People were desperately poor, as I remember.
Very poor.
Yeah. And you see poverty all around you. Beggars?
Yes.
And
everywhere.
People trying to scratch out a living.
Doing the best they could.
What's this? What's this?
Oh, this is a relic from the past of Korea.
Speaking of people trying to get by.
Out on the street, you would have a person with a cart, and he would have, my Korean pronunciation will be a little bad, but hang with me, yut.
Yeah.
It was a sweet candy.
Yeah, kind of a taffy.
Taffy.
Yeah.
A little harder than what we think of as taffy.
Yeah, crunchy.
And they would sell, or you would get a little piece of yut for a bottle.
Oh.
Anything that you had, wire, or anything that you could kind of trade.
Junk man. He's a junk man trading junk for candy.
He was a junk man, but he was just trying to survive.
Yeah. And Korea, there were a lot of people like that back those days.
Yes, a lot of people.
And thievery?
A lot of thievery.
Petty thievery.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I never had a pickpocket, but I heard there were a lot of pickpockets.
Well, one of the most interesting things that happened to me, I was living in Busan, Korea, which we call, the English pronunciation was kind of then instead of
the romanization.
The romanization has changed on Busan, but we were living in a house, and one night there was a break-in that we didn't know about until in the morning.
Oh.
But I was sleeping on a tatami mat. Now, I don't know if we know what tatami mats are
I think
anymore.
a lot of people don't know what a tatami mat is, but it's a tatami was a Japanese bamboo woven spongy mat that they'd sleep on.
On the floor.
The Japanese would sleep on, and there were a bunch of them in Korea.
Yeah. At that time, there were a bunch of them in Korea, and we slept on those. And so we just slept on that with a blanket and a pillow.
Yeah.
I needed a pillow, not a Chinese pillow that's glass and square, but this is a soft pillow.
Nice pillow, okay.
And in the morning, we realized that we had been broken in to, and a few things taken, like you say, kind of petty thievery.
Yeah.
but over my head, on each side of my head, there was a shoe footprint.
On the tatami.
No, on the pillow.
On the pillow. Oh my goodness! That
So somebody had stood over me that night, and there was footprints on the pillow.
Was he the watchdog in case someone woke up? Was to handle you while someone else was taking the stuff?
No. This was the petty thief.
Yeah, yeah.
His shoes.
We got hit in Samcheong-dong, and they came into the kitchen living room area and took everything, books, everything. And we had a stand there. They didn't take that stand, a little bookcase. But on the top of the bookcase, screwed in with screws, was a pencil sharpener. They took the pencil sharpener. And they were leaning in through, the bedroom was connected to the kitchen through a window. I think the house was remodeled. I think it used to be an outside window or something. And they had come in with a pole, and they were pulling our suits off the rack one at a time. And there were apparently 3 of them or more, because apparently they were funneling it out to other people going out the front door. And one of the guys woke up, yelled, and ran after them. They were all gone just like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, petty thievery. Anyway, people were just poor.
Yeah,
really poor.
They were just poor. And sleeping quarters and houses were not quite secure like apartment buildings now.
Now, yeah.
Now.
Our houses, you had to have a houseboy or a shingmo in the house at all times. Remember shingmo?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people today probably wouldn't know what a shingmo is. A shingmo is a maid, but they're very often poor country girls who had a chance to go to the big city, and they were sort of enslaved. They had to watch the house, and a thief wouldn't break in even if it was a young woman there, even a young girl, because the shingmo would protect the house by just physical presence. It wasn't a matter of not being overcome. They could overcome them, but they wouldn't do it. It was all sort of petty thievery so people could get by.
Now, back in the 60s also, thatched roofs were extremely common.
Yeah, you see them everywhere.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
So thatched roofs are a little unique. You need to go to a museum somewhere in Seoul.
A folk village.
You go down to the folk village.
Where it's been authorized to retain because they made thatched roofs illegal in like 71, I think. Yeah. But in 65, we saw thatched roofs
everywhere.
All over the place, yeah.
So that was a little bit of what my initial thoughts on Korea were. But also, out on the streets, it wasn't like Korea today. There were all different types of transportation. One was you would have an oxen pulling a cart.
Yeah, yeah.
At Cheong'un-dong in Seoul.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right downtown.
Right downtown. This is not something that was out in rural Korea only. Cheong'un-dong, there were oxen pulling carts. Then there was also the streetcars.
Yeah, and you're telling me that you hired an ox cart to make a move one time.
Well, we moved from a dong called Cheong'un-dong, which is right up across from the Blue House.
Yeah,
it's right across from it.
Yeah,
and we needed to go all of the way over to what then was not as big as an area, but was still called Yeongdeung-po.
Oh yeah, Yeongdeung-po was an industrial area.
It was a very industrial area.
Yeah, and poor.
And very poor.
Yeah.
At that time. Now there were some. When I say poor, the workers were generally poor. There were some companies and the managers who had a lot of money, but they didn't live always next to the industrial parts.
Uh-huh.
So,
you lived in some really poor areas, like you lived in Urak-dong.
I lived in Urak-dong, yeah.
And in Urak-dong, I never went there because they sold it by the time I was around, even though I was there only a month after you. But I never went to Urak-dong. But I heard about it. You called it the Rock.
Called it the Rock.
It was up on a high place, and there were walls on the sides.
There were walls on the sides, and it was up on a high place. I'm trying to think. I'm going to over-exaggerate on this, but there were probably 50 to 150 steps to go up.
Oh, really?
To get up on top.
To where
and there was no other way up
to where you lived.
To where I lived. And that was a long, hard trek sometimes.
Tell me about the long, hard trek for the poor guys with the honey buckets. Tell me about the honey buckets.
Well, the honey buckets, I'm not sure that everybody today even knows honey buckets, but in the 60s in Korea, there was not a very good sewer system.
There
was no sewer
system.
I think the sewer was called a Gaecheon.
Gaecheon is a stream. A Gaecheon should be a stream, but the streams were virtual sewers.
So there was a Gaecheon, I think, from Samcheong-dong down towards the city.
Yeah, yeah.
And this was just sewer.
Yeah.
Not water, sewer.
Yeah. I lived in Samcheong-dong when the Gaecheon was open, and they covered it with a road. They put a cover over it, and under that road today in Samcheong-dong, there's a Gaecheon that flows there. I think it's clean now, though.
I do not remember when it was covered, but I do remember when it was open.
Yeah, and there's a little road along the side of the stream going up to Samcheong-dong.
But in Cheong'un-dong, which it was not that poor at that time.
Yeah, Cheong'un-dong was a nice area.
It was a nice area.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, a pyeonso had to be cleaned.
Yeah. Now, there's a word we don't use anymore. It's pyeonso.
Oh, don't we?
Oh,
okay.
No. You don't say pyeonso.
Oh, so, okay.
You say wajang, but back in those days, it was a pyeonso. And the pyeonso had to be cleaned out by a guy who came with a dipper.
He had a pole.
Yeah.
And on one end of the pole was a bucket.
Yeah.
And on the other end of a pole was a bucket.
Yeah, and then he had a dipper where he'd fill both buckets.
That's right, but he could balance the two buckets on the pole, and then he would go in. At
Iruassidong, that'd have been a real torture.
That was a hard, because you had to go upstairs.
Yeah, and
went
downstairs. Go up with empty honey buckets and come back down with full honey buckets.
They slosh out. Well, there was no other way to do this.
They slosh. You know, when you had your pyeonso cleaned, how often did we get our pyeonso cleaned? Every 2-3 months or so, wasn't it?
Probably.
2-3 months. And you knew when you had your pyeonso cleaned because the air was thick for a day or two after.
Not just your place, the whole neighborhood.
Yeah, yeah. And they tend to go through a whole neighborhood.
They would go through a neighborhood, kind of like garbage pickup.
Yeah,
You kind of do it as in a neighborhood.
Yeah.
Then they would take the person carrying the pole with the two buckets on the end. He would go out into the street where there was. It must have been trucks from the army because they were pretty good. They were big trucks.
Big trucks, yeah.
And they had tanks on the back.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they would pour this into.
And then where would they take it? What would they do with it?
Well, one of the places they would take it was out into the fields because night soil.
Another word for it. Yeah, the fertilizer. Yeah.
It's fertilizer.
So
this night soil.
Yeah.
In my understanding at that time would have been.
Yeah.
Human fertilizer out in the fields.
Yeah, and because of that. You couldn't eat a lot of the vegetables because it was full of the parasites from the fertilizer.
If you were a foreigner, you weren't supposed to eat any of them.
Yeah. And if you did, you had to wash it in Clorox bleach or something to clean it.
Yes. And also in that regard of eating things, water had to be boiled.
Yeah, we always had boiled water.
For maybe 3 minutes. I can't remember, but it had to be boiled, not just turned to boil. It had to be boiled for a period of time. Now, that might have been just...
So we never had bottled water back in those days. The only water we had was boricha. We drank boricha all the time.
All the time.
Yeah, yeah.
But Korea drank boricha.
Yeah.
restaurants.
Yeah,
It was
every place has
boricha.
boricha. Yeah, but you know, back in these days, boricha is kind of a nice flavor, toasted flavor. But in those days, it tasted to me like the bottom of a tin can, because the pots they boiled them in were sometimes degenerating, rusting pots. I don't know.
Maybe I was so grateful for boricha. I was grateful for boricha. So that was one of the very unique things.
So we had to boil our water. We had to be careful of our vegetables because the fields were fertilized with human fertilizer from the honey buckets, from the cleaning out the pyunso all over. And that changed eventually and with industrialization to bring in chemical fertilizer, so you didn't have to use the night soil anymore. So that was one of the big changes in Korea that we've seen.
Very big change.
Yeah, and you know, the honey bucket business was a good business because they'd charge you to clean it, then they'd sell it
out to the farms.
Yeah, they'd make money on both ends. It was a good business.
Well, I'm not sure it was that great of a business.
Pretty awful
business. It was a pretty dirty job, but I always admired those that had to do that.
Oh yeah, yeah.